Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about what I see at least as an extremely alarming statistic that's coming out from Canada, Australia, Britain, and the United States, which is approximately 3 in every 4 new jobs that have been created over the last 10 to 15 years in the West. This is, of course, during the period of mass migration, that 3 out of every 4 new jobs, or 75%, have gone to recent mass migrants. Now, given the proportion of these mass migrants are completely illiterate third world peasants with no skills, no capabilities, no job knowledge, or many of them have never even had a job. And so, they've lived as rural subsistence peasants out in the hinterland, in the grass, the mud hut, and so on. Many have never seen running water, flushing toilets, or electric lights. So they're coming to the West, whether, as very sort of spuriously termed refugees and asylum seekers, or part of a mass migration system that lowers the bar to absolutely subterranean levels, to make sure that any illiterate, physically handicapped peasant can make it as a migrant. As long as you're brown and black, if you're a white engineer from Germany who's married to an accountant and they speak good English and all that sort of stuff, they can't come to the West. They've got to jump through hoops and hurdles forever. But if you're an illiterate peasant from the third world, bingo, walk in the door. Now, there's a few things to look at here. There's a claim that the Western workforce, as in the total employment, the number of people working, is being added to at the rate of 4 to 5% a year. When you look at that, now some of these statistics are rather creative, and they rely on a lot of statistical sort of tricks to arrive at these figures. But as Mark Twain or Samuel Langhorne Clemens said, there are lies, damned lies, in statistics. And these statistics are clearly are quite fanciful. Nonetheless, let's assume that it's somewhere in that general wider ballpark. That say there's a workforce of 100 people. That there's another 4 to 5 jobs being added every year to this, and of these new jobs, out of the five new jobs added, say 3.5 or 4 of them are going to migrants. Now, given the overwhelming proportion of these migrants, again, are illiterate third world peasants who've never had a job and have no skills, and the qualifications they supposedly have been acquired through very corrupt bribing people type practices. The credentials that they claim they have that allows them to migrate to places like Australia, they've been acquired through bribery and all sorts of underhand means. But nonetheless, they arrive. Now, you say, well, gee whiz, there seems to be, how can an economy like Australia or any Western country, how can they take in millions of these people and then they are all given these jobs? How is that even possible? The economy's not growing. It's growing by on a per capita basis. It's not growing at all. It's actually shrinking. So what parts of the economy are carrying on are doing so only through debt, and that the major growth engine of the economy is appreciation of real estate prices, which is not production. It's just asset speculation and asset inflation. It's not production. There's no productivity underpinning the debt. So it's simply a round robin of passing debt around to different players in the economy, rather than anything productive at all. So where are these new jobs coming from? Now, the claim that these mass migrants are all engineers, rocket scientists, and triple PhDs in this or that, that's clearly nonsense. It's an absolute grotesque lie, and endless lie upon lie upon lie that the globalist media-controlled machine's telling us. But if we look at where the growth in jobs is, it's there's been an explosion in low-paid jobs. So if we look at say, where has the job growth been? Well, it seems to be that they're almost equally competing for first place here. One is in the home care, elderly care industry. Now, remember that industry was fully populated with workers. So where have the white workers that once worked there gone? They've simply been replaced. Those are not new jobs. Jobs have been added, but they're not. There's very few. There's actually no new jobs. So what we're talking about is a rotation of jobs, not new jobs, and that needs to be understood. Nonetheless, there's been an increase in, say, assigning personal, and I've seen this firsthand, assigning personal carers to people who are, say, both physically ill and mentally handicapped. And so somebody comes from some African peasant place, and they speak enough English anyway, and they're assigned as the personal carer. So they get the job of driving this person around, or taking them to the shop, or taking them on outings, or something like that. So and often these people are being signed as helpers for mass migrants who are so handicapped that they can't function. So they're importing migrants to look after other migrants who have severe health issues. I mean, it's insane, but there's jobs being created there. So there's two issues here. One is because of the lower cost of having a peasant from Africa coming in, then you can assign someone a personal care, whether they need it or not. So I see this as artificial communistic type job creation rather than a real job that's needed. But anyway, so these people have these pretend jobs, and there's certainly a lot of those. So there's big growth in jobs in the home health area. Now, a lot of this too is affirmative action, as in we have to have a brown lesbian female in charge of the caring system, because that's equity and affirmative action and gender race quotas and minority this and so that. So there's also a huge amount of incompetence being added in to the whole system, which means that more people are needed than otherwise would be needed, because it's so dysfunctional in its operational management. The next area of growth for jobs is in takeout food stores. Now, here there's been a huge increase in offshore franchise ownership of takeout food stores, whether it's takeout chicken or whatever it might be. And so these franchise operations have gone primarily to, not to some local business guy that wants to have a bit of independence, but in fact it's going to offshore franchise owners from India and China and places like that, who can use all sorts of tax minimization processes, borrowing money from overseas, various profit repatriation schemes. They then load up these places with peasant workers from India or China or Africa or wherever, and they house them 20 to a room and 20 to a two-bedroom apartment. This sort of, so it dovetails in with property speculation and scams there, labour hire scams and all sorts of stuff. So they've got a cheap workforce, given that the salary of the workers is paid in kind, for example, in rent and in food and so on. So this allows these people to then undercut if you like, the market price for labour, and also they don't have to operate in a market-driven competitive economy. They're using all sorts of tax offsets and, again, the labour hire. So there's large numbers of people. So there's been an explosion of workers in that sector, but none of or very few of these businesses are viable anyway. You see it too in even in the area that I live in, a cafe owner, who could be a local white guy, something, a cafe, a restaurant owner will get, he'll get a knock on the door from the Chinese or Indian or whatever labour hire firm to say, look, how many waiters and cooks, chefs or whatever do you need? Okay, I need 10. Okay, we'll supply the whole 10. the whole thing. We'll turn up at 6. We'll work them 12 hours a day. They'll only get half an hour break in the day. Work them 12 hours a day, and you pay us a fee, and we'll just take care of everything: the cooking, the serving the customers and cleaning the place. We'll take care of everything, and it'll only cost you X. So one flat payment a week, and we'll do everything. So the guy, the owner of the business looks at, well, I employ local people. I've got all these other benefits and things I have to pay. I've got to do all this sort of stuff, and it's going to cost me, $2,000 a week. These guys will do everything. I even get more people here, and I only have to pay $1,000. So because of the labour hire scams and the structuring of how they're doing this, with again property speculation and all sorts of offsets, tax offsets, they can afford to do this. These are peasants that are being paid 2/5 of nothing, and they've got dangled in front of them is, you can become a citizen in the West one day and bring out your whole village, every village. You can bring out every relative you've ever had. You'll be the big matriarch of the whole thing. So look at this. We're setting you up for a future here that you couldn't dream. So a lot of them sucker for this, but it's all part of it. It's tantamount to slavery in my view. But then, huge amounts of people are coming out there. The other areas, given in the retail sector at least, shops are particularly things like clothing shops and so on, are typically now being used just as a fitting room, and then people go online and order the stuff at a lower price, which many, including myself, by the way, have done. So this changes the sort of people you need in a lot of the retail stores. So there's been an explosion in low-paid bullshit jobs in the retail sector. Also, there's been an increase in, say, senior, people over the age of 65 who are still of somewhat functional health to go and work in retail chains, things like that, hardware stores and so on. And in the local hardware store at where I live, there's at least half the staff have to be over the age of 50, if not over the age of 60. Some of them walking around with quite clear handicaps, and so I don't know what's going on there. But there's been an explosion in employment there. But if you look at the average wage, it's entry level. So wherever entry level wage, cleaners is number 4. So if you look at the top 4, boom, explosion in employment over the last 15 years, it's all been in those absolute entry level jobs. And this is where the primary, pizza delivery, the list goes on. Couriers delivering stuff to your door from Amazon, and that got a big shot in the arm from the COVID thing. This is where the employment has been, or the increase rather in employment has been. Once you go outside of that and you look at, say, better paid employment, say, the average wage or above, that type of thing, then it's really drifted sideways. It hasn't increased. So it's gone maybe slightly downward, but kind of gone sort of sideways there. So for the new white people coming into the workforce, not the migrants, but the local residents of the West, for the new people coming into the workforce, then the conditions, they're not as good, but they're probably not vastly changed from what they were years ago, but certainly they haven't improved, and I would argue gone backwards somewhat. Now we come to the other side of it, where the government has substantially increased employment in giving jobs, gifting jobs to very undeserving, in my view, people coming from India and Pakistan, places like that. Now, what they've done to sort of fiddle the books, if you will, is rather than take these people on as direct employees, they take them on through various forms and structures of labour hire through the big consulting firms, that sort of thing. So they run these huge labour hire scams where people are re-employed on yearly contracts. So technically they're not public servants. They don't exist on the payroll. There's just these one-off huge payments being made each year or ongoing payments to the big consulting or big labour hire firms. So you can go into various government departments that didn't have a single brown or black face 10 years ago to now see there isn't a single white face there. No one speaks English as a first language, and you have to navigate these. And I wonder, as part of the humiliation to be inflicted on the local white people, this is now what you've been reduced to. You have to run the gauntlet of all these brown and black people that can barely speak any English if you want to get anything done or access any government service. I'm convinced it's a humiliation ritual. I mean, what else can it be? So, so there's been a huge increase in employment there. Now, also in the private sector, I've mentioned this a number of times, where any business that relies primarily or absolutely on government contracts, that is, they've got their snouts in the taxpayer trough, there's been a huge increase in, if you like, the outsourcing concept, or public-private partnership, as it's sometimes called, where these organisations that rely on government handouts, as in either government protection or government contracts, they've been leaned on and are willing participants. I don't see any pushback from them to hire as many brown and black people. So you can go into one of these multinational firms that's got these big race gender quotas and all this sort of stuff, and affirmative action employment quotas. And you can be sitting, not long ago I was sitting in a if you like, a quango, and all the people that were there were junior female employees from the third world. There wasn't a single, and this is quite a large contract that's being discussed. There was not one of them that was competent, qualified, accomplished, and local born that could speak English as a first language. Not one. One of the she was Indian or Pakistani Indian, I think. One of the young women there, she I tried to sort of make the once you realise you're dealing with amateurs that shouldn't be there, you have to try and make the conversation light and breezy. And so if you stick to just being professional and the facts and the issues, then they feel uncomfortable because they're clearly inadequate and unable to do the job. So you might as well soften things. And so I tried to make it chatty. And the Indian lady who'd be in her mid-20s admits that she never actually had a job before in her life. This is the first job ever, and she comes straight off the plane and walks straight into a job in this quango, and that's not possible in the real world. There's no way on merit she could have got that job, but nor could anyone else in the room. There was one lady who came from somewhere in East Poland, I think it was, or somewhere around there. She probably could have got the job on merit, even though her English was like, she probably could have, but that's the only one. No one else could have. Now, the thing about this is the employment is exploding in areas of affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion, or the low-paid entry-level peasant jobs, which is creating this massive serf peasant class, where their purchasing power is getting further and further away from any form of financial independence. That these people don't make enough money to rent a fucking shoebox and live in it, so they can only live in collectives of 20 people to the two-bedroom apartment type of thing. That's the only way. There is no other way of living, given their income and its patchy nature. For example, they may, on casual employment, they may be needed this week, but not next week. So they don't know day to day what their income is going to be. So they can, again, only live collectively. Now, their situation in the West may be better than it was in their mud hut peasant village. I get that. But they're no benefit to this country and the Western society, no benefit at all. They're a benefit to a small elite that are getting much richer, but that's it. So one of the good government press releases in whether it be England or Australia or America or Canada or anywhere in the West, they crow about employment is robust, unemployment is low, and this and that, and we're creating shitloads of new jobs. No, you're not. There's no jobs being created. There is this artificial job in the public service. There must be half the people aren't needed. It's just a bullshit communist job creation scheme, as indeed it is at the bottom end. For example, if they have to pay someone a proper wage to work in the restaurant, that restaurant wouldn't exist. or that takeout food store wouldn't exist. It cannot compete along commercial lines. Therefore, capital is artificially being assigned to that purpose, but it's inefficient. It's all round inefficient. It cannot compete in the marketplace, and it can only compete through tax evasion and peasant serf labour. That's the only way it can compete. So these jobs that have been created aren't real jobs. They're not real sustainable jobs in any stretch. And then the universities, for example, are employing vastly more people than, and again, all affirmative action and diversity, DEI type employment. So when we take away this facade of new jobs being created and this facade that the economy is growing, then we see that these new jobs being created are just bullshit, and that there is no growth in the economy and no real growth in jobs. There's just this artifice, and the quicker we come to terms with that, the better. But again, coming back to this idea that of the new jobs created over the last 10 to 15 years, 3 out of every 4 of them have gone to illiterate mass migrant peasants, then we can see just from that the extent of the problem. I was looking at an Australian government press release just recently where, and you can tell it's all propaganda, where they crow about how many new jobs are going, and new jobs for women and new jobs for black lesbians and new jobs for LGBTQ. And so they were just going hysterically globalist ideological rather than pointing out what jobs are really adding value to the economy. How many jobs are there to produce goods and services of value to the economy that are increasing the productivity of the nation, making our lives better and so on? There isn't any. You've been with TASLA today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.